I want to tell you about Texas radio and the Big B. It was a warm summer night with our song playing on the radio.
What was the first time you thought you would be interested in pursuing radio for a career?
Well, when I got out of high school, I had to make a decision about what I was going to do with my life. And I started at San Diego City College just taking a general business course. And then somebody introduced me to the radio department there. And then they call it communications now, but they call it radio and television arts then. So I got into that program, and they still have the station, I believe, KSDS FM, 88.3 at San Diego City College. So if you were in the class, everybody had an hour radio show. And I started out doing jazz, because that was the format. And Mr. Roman was the teacher. He was old school, and he liked to do radio dramas too. So we did that too, which I wasn't into. I wanted to be on the radio being a DJ, but we had to do that too, where we would do The Shadow Knows, that kind of stuff. But while I was at KSDS FM, I was also working at KLRO FM, KSDO FM, which was automated, and several other FM stations around San Diego. And this was in the early 60s. And in those days, FM didn't count. AM was that's where you made the money. That was the big deal. And every time I tried to get a job at an AM station, they would say, hey, well, you're an FM guy, so you don't have any experience in AM radio. And so after doing minimum wage working these radio stations, these FM stations in San Diego, I realized I had to leave San Diego. And I went out to Arizona to get my first AM experience. And I sent out a whole bunch of resumes, and KAWT, right on the border of Douglas, Arizona, and Agua Prieta, Mexico. And it's a little town then. It's different now. It's part of Mexico now, basically. So I drove into Arizona. I drove past this. There was like a few buildings, like a restaurant and a couple of little buildings down there. And I got to this little shack. And there was this Mexican guy standing at the shack. And he said, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm going to Douglas. He said, well, you just passed it. I was entering into Mexico. And so that's how small that town was. And they smelled it, the copper that came from Bisbee, Arizona, up the hill. So I was there, and at that station, you did everything. You came in the morning, you did news, and you ran the Mutual network and several other networks off of the phone lines. And then you did the local news, and then you did country and Western music. But I wanted to be a rock and roll guy. So my boss would be on in the afternoon, and he would do his thing, country and Western and news and news and news and news. And he let me have a nighttime show called College Uprising, because they had a little college down there too. And it was just for the kids. And this is the first time he had done that. And rock and roll was like taboo to them before that. But he liked me, so he let me have this little show. So I did that for a while. Then I sent out a bunch more resumes, and I got hired at KAMP in El Centro, which was a cool little deal. That was 1967. It was cool because El Centro was a small town, and you were like a big fish in a small pond. You were a big star then. And this was when the Monkees were real big. I played a lot of Monkees, and Sgt. Pepper was just being released. And we played, we were waiting for that to come out. When it came out, we just tracked it. And this is a little AM radio station. And I think one of the big lessons that I learned at that radio station was I was hired by the owner, and he had some other businesses in town, and $500 a month. And he said, "Hey, I know you guys, I know it's not a lot of money, but if we can put this station on the air and make it a success here in El Centro, then we'll pay you more money," and all that. But the lesson that I learned there was, and this happens pretty much, I think, everywhere, is we built that station. It became, everybody in town was listening, because there were several other radio stations in town. I think KXO and KROP, I think, was another one. And so what happens is when you build the station and it becomes very successful, and then they're making money, then they go, okay, now we can go out and get some professionals, instead of giving you the money. So they go out and get guys that have no clue to what built the station, right?
Kind of shot yourself in the foot then building it up.
Yeah. So it was a lesson that I learned. When I hear that, I go, I already know how that's going to go. But of course, I don't hear that these days,
No.
That was starting out. Anyway, so I was there for about a year, I think, 9 months or a year, and then I put out some more resumes, and I got hired at KTKT in Tucson. KTKT in Tucson and KRUX in Phoenix were the two sister stations of Leland Bisbee chain. So they were both number one in the markets, both markets. So I was there. I started midnight 6. I was hired by Bob Holliday. And Robert Kennedy was assassinated at the Ambassador Hotel while I was on the air at midnight.
Wow.
And Arizona doesn't change their clocks for daylight savings time. So there was an hour difference. And in those days, they were very big on news. News, that was when they actually had 5 or 6 guys that would go out on the street and get the stories and report like they do on TV, report from the scene. So news was huge. It was more important than anything else on the station because it made a lot of money. They could sell it. But the news department would go home after the end of the day, whatever, later, 7 to midnight, certainly they're not there, after 10 o'clock for sure. But I called the news director, got him out of bed, came over the wire about what happened. And so I called the news department. They came down, they reported all night long. And all of our competition was still sleeping in bed. So because of that, the next day they promoted me 7 to midnight.
Wow.
I got a promotion because it was that important to them. And as a matter of fact, I still have, if you go to bobbyblue.org/RFK, you'll hear the news reporting from while that was happening, at the time.
KTKT News Bulletin. Senator Robert Kennedy was shot at 12:15 a.m. today in a moment of political triumph in Los Angeles. His condition could not be immediately ascertained, but the Associated Press...
Was KFXM your next stop?
Yeah. Kim Mariner was in the news department there at KTKT, and he went on to KFXM in San Bernardino and told Al Anthony, hey, you got to hire this guy, Bobby Blue. And so Al Anthony hired me, and I packed up all my stuff in the car, quit KTKT, drove across the desert. I'd never been to San Bernardino in my life, pull up in front of the radio station, only to find out that they're out on strike, and I'm crossing the picket line. And here I am. I quit my job. I got all everything that I owned stuffed into my car, and crossing a picket line at KFXM. Well, Al Anthony, he wasn't sure how it was going to go with whether they were going to go union or what was going to happen. So the guys that he hired, and a couple of guys that actually stayed on, he gave everybody a name, the Jones Boys, and everybody, I think I was either Unsinkable or Nonstoppable. I don't remember. Unsinkable Jones, Nonstoppable Jones, but we were the Jones Boys. Because I was thinking, well, this could change and we go back. Those guys are going to come back in, but it didn't go union, and so then we dropped the Jones Boys thing. And so I was doing 7 to midnight at KFXM. Then I got involved with a lot of the concert promoters that were coming in from LA to do shows at Swing Auditorium. And since I had the 7 to midnight slot and really good ratings, I hooked up with these guys, and they wanted the promotion on the air, of course, obviously, and the radio station promoted it all day long because it was co-produced by the radio station. And that was just a way of getting the radio station to give it a lot more free promotion like that. But I got involved with the promoters in LA, coming into San Bernardino at Swing Auditorium. And then I was the guy that did all the local stuff. I had the flyer crews and took care of the ticket. There was no Ticketron then. So the tickets were sold at the local record stores. And I went around every day to the record stores to get the count, give them more tickets if they needed them, and collect the money and do that. Take care of hiring the police, because we had to use the local police department guys that were moonlighting, after the job for security. They wouldn't let us use our own guys or anything like that. Because this was in 1968 now. So this is when we were the hippies and they were the pigs. So there was a lot of friction. But we did a lot of concerts. One every 2-3 weeks, I think we were doing there at Swing Auditorium. I think the most memorable one was the Jimi Hendrix. We did Jimi Hendrix 3 times there. But the last time we did Jimi Hendrix there was a riot, a huge riot. And what was going on, we had 7,500 people inside Swing, which really only was supposed to hold 6,500 according to the fire department. But we had another like 3,000 people outside trying to get in. And what was going on inside the auditorium, Jimi Hendrix wouldn't come out. He wanted more money. So I had to keep going back out on stage going, oh, he's going to be right out. Just a few more minutes, 10 more minutes. And then that would go by and no Jimi Hendrix. And then the crowd they're getting madder and madder. But outside, there was about 3,000 people trying to get in. And a group of kids grabbed this pipe and started ramming the wood doors with the pipe, trying to ram the pipe through the door. And there was a off-duty police officer standing on the other side that was paid for security. And they got him in the back with the pipe. Pipe went through the door and got him in the back. Okay, so now San Bernardino, they've been waiting for this moment because they had never used their pepper spray, tactical force, whatever, before. And so all of a sudden now these Jeeps with these big cannon, like, where they could shoot the tear gas projectiles out, the canisters. And so here they come. The kids are riding outside. The police are shooting these canisters into the air. And it's like 100, it gets really hot out there in the summertime in San Bernardino. It's like 100, 110 or more. But inside, it had to be like about 120, inside the venue. So the tear gas was seeping in through the cracks of the doors and stuff. And you could see the tear gas like at eye level floating across the venue inside Swing Auditorium. Still no Hendrix. He's in the back. He wants more money. Promoters are trying to get him out there, but they're trying to negotiate with him. And people inside, their eyes are burning. They're pissed. And I'm thinking, how do I, there's no way to get out. I'm thinking, I want to get out of there. You couldn't go out the back door. You couldn't go out the front door. You were there. You were in the middle of it. There's no way you're going to get out of that. And so finally they paid him the money that he wanted, the extra money. And he went on. And anyway, that was quite a night. But we did Creedence a lot of, I think maybe 3 or 4 times a year we did Creedence Clearwater Revival because we could always sell that out in advance because they had so many hits. And same with Three Dog Night and some of the other groups. Lee Michaels was a local guy, Lee Michaels and Frosty, and one of the sales account executives, as they call them now, sales guys at KFXM, was actually their manager. So we were able to do those shows pretty cheaply and make money on that. We did that a lot. People loved them. They loved Lee Michaels, but they really loved Frosty. He would play with his bare hands and beat on those drums until his hands bled all over those drums. I mean, it was primitive, but it was really something to watch. But anyway, we did a lot of shows there.
You said Sammy Hagar got his start there?
Sammy Hagar was he was from San Bernardino, and he was the house band. Him and Sammy Hagar and the Justice Brothers was the name of the group. So they were the house band for a club up on Highland Avenue, and they would sell out every night. I mean, he was really, really, really big locally. And I remember Sammy coming to me one day saying, "Hey, Bobby, can I open at Swing? Can you get me in to open at Swing?" And at that time, we would do 3 groups. There'd be the headliner. Then the second group would be the group that you had to use with the headliner through the agent. You had to use both groups because the agent wanted to get some recognition for that group so that next year they could headline. And then we would use a local group for the local audience, local people. Ball and Jack was really big. Redbone, they dressed in Indian feathers and danced around like Indians, and people really loved those guys. And then later I found out that they were actually Latino, they were Mexican guys, Pat and Lolly Vegas. They weren't even really Indians. But they did a great show and people loved them. So we would use those guys. And I told Sammy, I said, Sammy, because these guys were really a draw, Ball and Jack especially. I said, Sammy, I don't think you're ready quite yet to be the opening group. And so years later, and he's with Van Halen, they're at the Forum, 19,500 people, right? Sold out. I'm standing on the side of the stage where the curtains are with the group, the group's waiting to go out on stage, waiting to be announced to go out on stage. The announcer comes out and says, "All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it now, Sammy Hagar and Van Halen." And then Sammy slaps me on the shoulder and he goes, "Hey, Bobby, you think I'm ready yet?" And he goes running out on stage and boom. So kind of regretted that one. But, what was happening was then the culture was changing. And also, the FCC in 1966, the FCC mandated that any radio that was built in the United States or sold in the United States, because most radios were coming from Japan then, had to have the FM band on. Cars only had AM radios prior to that. And so after that, they had AM, FM. So FM started picking up. Everybody's in their car. And prior to that, if you told anybody that an FM station could be number 1 in any market, they would think you're one brick short of a load. But FM started building, and the culture was changing. 1967, Summer of Love. So we're all hippies. Now we're doing Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Canned Heat and Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane and I like Guy Saxon and the Seeds because he was the first traveling light show. So the culture was changing, and AM radio, KFXM, we were playing Hendrix and we were playing a lot of those groups, but we were also playing Bobby Sherman, Tom Jones, What's New Pussycat, and a lot of stuff like that. I think maybe stuff on Buddha Records, like 1910 Fruit Gun Company, and Spiral Staircase, what I couldn't say. It's what I couldn't say. Foundations, another one, but that's just me personally. But so I wouldn't play those records. In a 4-hour air shift, you would actually go through the whole top 40 of the, you could play them in any order you wanted. You pulled the 45 from the rack and queued it up and played it. But on a shift, you would play all those records. But I would leave out the Bobby Shermans and the bubblegum stuff and just play Hendrix and Joplin, Take a Little Piece of My Heart, and those kinds of groups. Grateful Dead, Canned Heat. So I got called into Al Anthony's office a lot of times. And Al saying, you have to play all the records. You can't just not play some of the records. But I would still keep doing it because I was connected with swing. We were doing those shows. I had that reputation. I emceed most of those concerts. And I was involved in most of those concerts. And I had long hair down the back of my back, a beard, full beard. I was a hippie. I heard about this station down in Long Beach, KNAC. When you're doing 6 days a week on the radio, and you're involved in doing remotes and all the things that you have to do, and the concerts, I was working with the concerts, all the other stuff. You're really, really busy. I didn't know what KNAC was. I'd never heard about KNAC before. But somebody told me about KNAC, that it was like a just starting out freeform progressive rock radio station. And I thought, this is for me, because I was getting tired of having to play the Bobby Shermans. So I went down, I heard about it, and a week later, I went down to the radio station. It was that soon. I went down to KNAC and I talked to Ron McCoy, and Ron had heard of me because of the shows at Swing, and I actually was tripling the ratings at 7 to Midnight over KMN, which, KMN is a good station. I don't want to say anything bad about that station because they were doing a great job.
There is one thing I want to go in at some time about how you tripled the ratings in one particular event.
Well, I was going to get to that. Yeah, the Paul McCartney is Dead. Donnie Branker, which he was producing ABC in Concert, and he was West Coast Promotions. So he was doing a lot of the shows initially at Swing. And so he and I were working on all these shows together. And he would just call, he didn't have to come in from LA every day. He would just call me when he needed stuff done in the local market, check on tickets, get a flyer cruise, all that kind of stuff. And he called me one night and he said, hey, there's this thing going around about Paul McCartney is dead. And I said, wow, are you kidding me? So I put that out on the air, right? And then people start calling in with clues. And so that went on and on. And, that was violation of format. So I got called in Al Anthony's office again, but it took off. So, it was the whole show. So night after night, it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it went on for several weeks. But after the second night, I think Al Anthony called me in the office. He goes, Bobby, what are you doing? You're breaking format. I didn't tell you could do this, take these calls like this and all that. But he knew how big it was getting. And so he said, all right, well, do it for a couple more nights, and then that's it. But I think it ended up going 2 or 3 weeks. It got a big write-up in the local paper and some national stuff too, some national coverage. So it killed K-Man for that 7 to Midnight slot. And so I was actually tripling the ratings in that slot.
It kind of took over your show completely for that time, didn't it?
It took over the show completely. Yeah, that was it. That's how we were doing. Kids were calling in clues, and then I would play it like I Am the Walrus, Paul McCartney is Dead, all of the different clues. So that's the way that went.
Somebody called you once and asked if you thought, I don't know why I remember this phone call, but asked if you thought that those were clues or coincidences. And in retrospect, knowing that the Beatles quadrupled their album sales during that period, do you think it was intentional?
Yeah, 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 probably more than likely, yeah. And and that's when people start talking about backmasking, playing records backwards, and secret messages in the Beatles' songs, and album covers, and oh, you see this, and oh, they're barefooted at Abbey Road. They're barefooted walking across the pedestrian crosswalk. All of this stuff. It was so much stuff. I mean, that's when I learned how a conspiracy theory could really grow. And I mean, it was unbelievable how many clues. There's so many clues. Of course, Paul was not dead, but there were so many clues that he was dead that it was everything pointed to the fact that he was dead. So that's how a conspiracy theory can grow.
There are still websites that insist it's true.
Yeah, well, there's flat earthers too, right? So anyway, Ron McCoy hired me at KNAC for a lot less money, I might add. But I was willing to take less money to be able to do what I wanted to be able to play the music that I wanted to on the air. And we were playing album tracks then. And this is before they called it AOR, when the programmers and the consultants came in around 75. Then start formatting it. And then now it's AOR, album-oriented rock. They had all these. But when we did that, we could do anything we wanted. It was totally free-form progressive rock. We did whatever we wanted. And there were times I would have the Firesign Theater come in, and they would just do their skits on my show for the 4 hours, and we wouldn't even play music. We'd just have them do that. I'd have them do that, just whatever you wanted to do. Which reminds me of a story, because KNAC, when I started, was on Ocean Boulevard in a castle. The castle was empty, but it had like a big swimming pool in the basement and ballrooms and all of that. But the castle was empty because they were selling it, and a prince owned it. And when you came in, you had to sign in with security to go to the radio station. The radio station was upstairs, up the elevator. And once in a while, the prince would be in the elevator going up with you, and he had the sash, and he had the medals and all of that, Actually, we were the last to get kicked out of that building before they sold it. And so we went over to 3rd and Pine in the Farmers and Merchants Bank building up on the 10th floor, the top floor. So we had a door access to the roof. And we could play whatever we wanted. So we could put on, say, like Tales of Topographic Oceans, or Journey to the Center of the Earth by Rick Wakeman, or All of the Who, Tommy, and just let it track. And then go up on the roof and get high. By the way, I haven't got high in 30 years. I stopped that a long time ago, but this was then. You got on the roof, and it's a big, heavy fire door, big, heavy metal fire door. And you have to prop it open, right? And somehow it closed behind me, and I'm up on the roof getting high, and now the door's locked. I can't get back in. And so the record is going, it's tracked through the whole side of the album, and it's going chick, 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 chick. Pretty soon, there's helicopters flying overhead, right? People call in going, hey, there's something wrong with the radio station. There's spotlights shining down on the top of the roof and everything, Please come up. And I got rid of the joint. I'm stoned out of my mind. My eyes are this big. Please come up. And I go, oh, I just went out for some fresh air, and the door got locked behind me and whatever. But I didn't get arrested or anything. So that kind of stuff happened a lot in those days.
You want to go back to any of your KMET years?
KMET was a class act. And it was owned by Metro Media then. It was called Metro Media Square. It's when you're going up 101, and there's that big, funny-looking thing hanging up over the building and over the freeway. And that was KTKT TV, Channel 11, which is still there. That was all Metro Media, but eventually it was bought out by Fox. So Fox bought all of that. And the interesting thing for me was right across the hall was KLAC, the country station that was also owned by Metro Media, and Don Henson was working at the country station, same shift that I had, which was a late night, and I worked with Don at KTKT in Tucson.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so that's kind of the way that goes.
You had some other pretty famous people you worked with at KMET too during that time, didn't you?
B. Mitchell Reed, the burner Mary Turner, Jeff Gonzer, Harold Pop Kelly, Ladd, which I had worked a little bit with at KNAC too when I first started at KNAC earlier on. And Ladd went from there to KLOS and then to KMET. And KLOS was like number one for a long time in LA, number one rock station. But they were the corporate rocker. And it was like different from what we were doing at KNAC, which was totally freeform. And KMET came along and they started more or less a freeform. They were a freeform format, pretty much like KNAC, but a little bit formatted. And then a little later, it got a little more formatted. But I can tell you that the success, and KMET became number one over KLOS. And I can tell you how we succeeded was, first of all, KMET was formatted, but they would leave the last 10 minutes of the hour, you could do what you wanted. You could play what you wanted. Otherwise, you played on the card, you picked a card. That's the next record you're going to play, Yeah, but the last 10 minutes, you had leeway, so you could make it your own show. It sounded freeform. It gave you freedom. It wasn't totally formatted. So that was one key that KLOS did not have. And the other is that we played more hard rock, not heavy metal, but hard rock. We didn't play the softer stuff. I mean, we weren't, for instance, just off the top of my head, like Paul Simon. We weren't heavy on Paul Simon. We weren't heavy on the softer Fleetwood Mac stuff, but we did play Over My Head or that stuff later on. While KLOS was playing a lot of more mixed sound of softer but we were crunching. We had a lot of crunch in the format. Deep Purple, for instance. Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, stuff that had crunch, but we didn't go Def Leppard. We didn't go the real heavy metal stuff. We played a lot of Led Zeppelin, that kind of stuff. So that's what made us different and really made us win in the market. So KMET you had to have credentials to get in, just to even get past the guard at the gate. And you go upstairs, you get in and go upstairs, and I mean, everything was high tech. They had just moved there because they were in another location. It was kind of funky, and they had just moved into that Metro Media Square, and everything was brand new. That was, and the board was just beautiful, man. I mean, that was, I think, the first slide pot board I worked on. Others were like the old Gates knobs and stuff like that. And so, I mean, but everything was so high tech. It was a little scary when you first walked in the door because it's so, it was so beautiful. And that was another thing where you had to have a key. If you went to the restroom or down to rip and read off the two teletypes, AP and UPI. And if you forgot your key, you're locked out of the control room. That was another thing. You had to always make sure you had that key. Behind you, behind the console, behind you, was a door. And that door led to a hallway that went into, I think it was like, I worked nights, so I think past that was like offices and stuff. But there was a door on both sides. So there was like a little space there. There was a room, And in the room, in the middle, on the floor, was like a carousel. It had bongs and it had, So you could go in there and smoke. and going back on the air and be creative, I guess I would say. And so that was an interesting thing about KMET.
Didn't Dr. Demento work at KMET?
Dr. Demento did work at KMET
On Sunday nights.
Yes, he did once a week, and he did all the novelty stuff.
Yeah, seemed way out of format for everything else they did there. But
Yeah, right. And they allowed, that was his thing.
that was a great show.
Oh yeah, very popular, very popular. So yeah, Dr. Demento was there. Also, Mike Harrison, who I worked with at KPRI down in San Diego. KMET was a great place to work. It was a great station. It's legendary, but KNAC is legendary as well. When I started KNAC in '71, and then I left to go down to San Diego to work for KPRI, because KPRI wanted to bring in this format that KNAC was doing. And KGB AM was the big station, the boss jock station, Bill Drake. And they changed over to KGB FM. So they were in competition now with KPRI. So I went down there in '73, and I was working for KPRI, and then I was approached by these guys that had a club called it was called Funky Quarters, but it was burnt down. One of the guys was one of the co-owners, and he heard me on the radio, and he said, "Hey, I want to start this new club. Do you want to be involved in it? Can you get the groups?" And since I had already been working with the groups at Swing, so I became the booker for the group, and we became partners. And that was a club called Neutral Ground. And that was on University Avenue, right down from Euclid in San Diego. And we'd have people like Elvin Bishop, Tim Weisberg, Sons of Champlin, which was really big in San Diego, Santana, which were friends of my partners. And so they played all the time. Oh, and we simulcast on KPRI. We on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we had the national acts. And then during the week, Monday night was like jazz night, Tuesday was open mic, and those kinds. And we'd simulcast on Friday and Saturday night on KPRI, the bands. And we'd do 2 shows a night. The club held, I'm trying to remember, I think the club held, it was 250 people, I think. And so we do 250 people, and we turn them out, and then they do another 250 people. Because being on the radio, people were lined up all the way around the block to get in. So it was a very, very cool deal. But the rules were no drug dealing in the club. No drugs, no drug dealing in the club, none of that kind of stuff. So what happened was somehow they were doing a drug deal out in the parking lot in front of the club. And the guys that they were dealing with tried to rip them off, and they pulled a gun, and the guy got shot, and he's dead. So that was the end of the club. And I called KNAC, and I said, "Hey, I want to come back." They said, "Sure." Ron said, "Sure. When do you want to come back?" And I said, "How about right away?" He said, "Well, why don't you come back tomorrow then?" So the next day I was back working at KNAC.
Is that when you had the TV show?
No, I had the TV show after, from KNAC I went to K-West, which was competing with KMET. And then I went to KMET after K-West. And then after I left KMET, I started Rockola. I'd use a local group, and then I would have the video from the record companies that they would send me, the big laser discs. They had the big, that was when they were trying to make the laser disc happen, and they were selling these laser machines and all of that, but it never took off. And so they would send me the video because they had no outlet for it at all, but they would send me the video in 3/4-inch U-matic. And so I would have a couple of national groups, big groups. And so I'd have the local group live, and then have air these two videos. This is like before MTV didn't start until 1983. This was 1970. Well, Rockola was 1979. We did some shows at Mayfair Theater in Santa Monica and the others at Channel 8 in Long Beach, which was a public access channel. And I was syndicating it regionally in California. And I had Cox in San Diego, Cox Cable in San Diego. And it was primarily cable. And we would simulcast the program, the audio portion, on KNAC on Friday nights. It was called Rockola Friday Night. And so on Friday night, and I paid KNAC for the airtime for the audio portion of it, which was really, really good for them. And I got a really good rate. So that was Rockola. It was doing well. It got expensive. Production got real expensive. Production was far more expensive. It cost far more than the money that was coming in from any kind of advertising. So, and I couldn't quite get over the hump because there were a lot. Well, I mean, I had like Artie Ripp, which was Buddy Joel's manager at the time, I think, that wanted to get involved. And he had a studio up in Hollywood and all of that. I had that kind of stuff going on, but I wasn't able to really secure enough advertising, and I didn't want to give it away to other people like Artie. Artie didn't have a really great reputation. Just ask Billy Joel, you know what happened. And I knew about that, so I didn't want to get too involved. I didn't want to get involved with that. So eventually I just couldn't maintain it because of the cost of production.
All right, I know we have a rock and roll show for you tonight. The name of the program is Rockola Friday Night. We do it every Friday night from 11 until midnight. Good summertime rock and roll, the only rock show in Long Beach, and a very special program lined up for you this evening. Robert Johnson's with us, Tycoon, Spiral Gyra, The Mechanics, Steve Hackett, and Ian Hunter. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on Rockola Friday Night, Robert Johnson.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So what happened after Rockola?
After Rockola, I got involved with the church. I worked full-time during the week. I created Chuck Smith's television department, which he didn't have before, because I had the experience from Rockola, you know. They already had video. They were already doing pneumatic stuff that they would show because they had an overflow, what they called the fellowship hall, overflow when the sanctuary was full, so the people would go there. And so they had the big screens so that they could see the service, but that was all being recorded on video. I saw that and I said, why aren't you guys doing television? I mean, you got it, you got everything here. So they said, well, make a proposal to the board. And I did. They said, yeah, okay, go for it. So that turned out, that was a $1.5 million a year budget.
Wow. That must have been quite a transition.
Yeah, it was. It was a transition for me because I actually joined the church and I became a Christian at that point. That's when I got rid of all the drugs, all of that stuff was gone, and now it was the new me. So I'm on this path now.
Got rid of everything but the name.
Yeah. And I used my experience to work for the church. So we were on, I got us on TBN, ACTS, which was the Southern Baptist Convention. They had a whole network of stations. Faith and Values out of New York, which I went back every 2 months I was on the membership committee there. So I had to fly back there every 2 months for the meetings. We were on FamilyNet, So a lot of the big networks so we were actually reaching 50 million people a week cumulatively, because
Wow.
if we were on every day on some of those networks, 5 days a week. So the cumulative audience, yeah, 50 million. Then I did that for 20 years, and I was the host. I would, at the end of the program, go, well, Pastor Chuck Smith would like you to have this free book, blah, 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 that kind of. So I worked for him for 20 years. Then I went to work for Raul Reese out at Calvary Chapel, Golden Springs, and did his radio department, headed up his radio department. And that was, again, another 1.5 million budget per year, which I was responsible for, of course, to the board at the end of the year. And I got us on most of the Salem stations, the big major markets. And they weren't concentrating on it. They didn't have a professional in there doing that before. Just some guy that worked for the church and didn't really know. So when I went in there, I got him in most of the major markets he was on, plus like 100 independents and whatever. So doing that, of course, then I had to oversee the customer service department, which, with the response that we got from the radio programs. And overseeing the customer service, I had to oversee fulfillment to make sure that they sent the stuff was sent out to the people that bought stuff. And then also oversaw new product development to offer on the program. So I was overseeing like 4 or so departments, but they took care of me real well there. And I drove from Orange County out to Diamond Bar for 12 years. I made that drive. So I did that. Oh, and I forgot to mention, while I was working for Chuck, Monday through Friday, on the weekends, I would work part-time for KYMS, which was a contemporary Christian station at the time, and then drive down to Palm Springs and do a Saturday night and Sunday morning on KCLV, which was the rock station down there, and then come back Monday morning and be in my office. And at the same time, I would leave my office in the morning to go to Bible Answer Man with Hank Hanegraaff, and then come back in my office. And then I would leave again to do New Life Clinics with Steve Arterburn, which both of these were national programs, national radio programs, primarily off the Salem satellite network. And so I was working 7 days a week. I did that for 10 years. I worked 7 days a week. But I did it because, for 2 reasons. First of all, Chuck didn't pay a lot of money. I did well with Raw but Chuck didn't pay a lot of money. But it wasn't about the money. I loved doing the radio. So I loved doing the KNAC thing and then going down to Palm Springs and doing KCLV. And I did it because I enjoyed it. So I was really, really busy for a good number of years there doing all that. I retired at 71 in 2014. So I got tired of that drive. And, you get, after 12 years doing that drive, you just get numb to it. It's just, you don't realize how far it is. And after I retired, I went, my Lord, what was that? I have never been out there since, because I think of it, man, that's too far. That's too far to drive. Yet I was doing that every day back and forth for like 12 years.
Did you ever have any times when your past life caught up with your current life, career-wise?
Career-wise, no. But I think that you will always live with the indiscretions of your youth. And I think everybody will. I think it does. There's certain things that will stay with you and come back at you. But when you're young and you're doing crazy stuff, which I did a lot of crazy stuff, you think you're invincible and you're going to live forever. And, you're having fun, especially when you're in sex, drugs, and rock and roll in Hollywood. Come on, man, in LA, and you're in that working for the #1 rock station in Los Angeles. And you're going to, you're going to all the VIP parties, the very private parties. You're backstage at every concert. That was a time when if a record promoter gave me tickets, that was a slap in the face. That's an insult. That was like, hey, it's a backstage pass, period. Otherwise, giving you tickets was like saying, hey, we don't want you here. So they didn't give you tickets. Sometimes they gave you a backstage pass and tickets. But yeah, it was crazy. And then at the Forum, you would have, after the show, there would be a party. And that was, your name had to be on a list. And that was a mixture of a whole lot of people that were on that list, but they were all in the business some way or another. In other words, the roadies or the, whatever, and the groupies, that the band was, whatever. And so there was that party, but then after that, there was another party at the Forum Club that was not the only way, there was no list. If they didn't recognize your face at the door, you weren't getting in. It was just by total recognition. And for the most part, it was the same thing with the clubs. And when I was at KNAC and KMET and whatever, I mean, in those days, the record companies spent a lot of money in promotion. And so you get free tab. So the Troubadour, Starwood, Roxy, Rainbow, a bar and grill, and your name would be on a list, but it got to the point where everybody, they recognized you at the door, and you didn't even really, if they didn't let you in, it was kind of like, could be embarrassing for them. You know what I mean? So, and then you went in and you went up, depending on the club, you go upstairs to the VIP section. You weren't in the free tab, bring as many friends as you want, all paid for. That was, the labels spent a lot of money back then. That all changed in the late 70s, but big time it changed. But prior to that, there was this concept of, especially like when I was at KNAC, there was this concept of, say, like Warner Brothers, they would release maybe 20 new projects almost every week, because the concept was, and I'll give you an example, Boston was like in this group. Okay, so the concept was, I think they spent like $100,000 on each group of the new releases. And if they could get airplay on just one of those groups, they get all their money back and make a lot of money. And so every week you had the record promoter coming down, like when I was at KNAC, coming down from LA, taking you out to lunch. I remember, A&M Records, they were big at that, and Columbia, and and then they would give you a gram of Coke on the side, slip you a gram of Coke or whatever you want. I remember one time I got they mailed me a set of beautiful headsets, expensive headsets with the new release and a gram of Coke. They have a special messenger deliver it, so it didn't go through the mail. They would say, take this record home, put the headsets on, and listen to it real good, and you're going to love it. But they're giving you a headset, so they're giving you a gram,
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, that happened all the time. So, yeah, so that's kind of how, that was the concept, and that's how that would work. I guess I could tell these stories now. I kind of hesitate but it's a long time ago. When I was at KNAC and when I became music director, I mean, I would get from the labels. I mean, I would get a stack of new albums every week. I would have maybe 25, 30 of them, and most of them never made the air. But like I said, Boston, that went on immediately. That was a group that was put together by Paul Ahern, kind of like the Monkees were put together. I don't think they even knew each other but that Paul Ahern created that group. for that commercial sound. He knew the format to make it, get airplay. He knew how it had to sound. And Boston at that time, I don't think they'd ever played together live on stage. But their first album was a huge success because that sound was great. All you had to do is drop the needle on that first track and you know that's going on the air. Yeah, so I would get this every week. I'd have a big stack of albums. Some of them, people knew the name. Some of them were maybe groups that had a success prior. The prior album was a big success, but the new one was not that whatever. But there was a record store called Platypus Records in Long Beach. And so I would take all those records down and I would get 50 cents each for the ones that nobody heard of, basically, whatever. And I'd get $1 or more for the better ones. Still shrink wrapped, and I get $100 and go buy a gram of Coke.
Were those the white label albums?
Oh, these are the promos. Yeah, they were punched. Yeah, they were punched.
Okay.
The promo punch. Yeah. And so that's kind of the way the industry was operating then. And again, the clubs, unlimited tabs, all of that. But like I said, in the late 70s, the industry changed radically and everything dried up. The money dried up and then it became very tight, very tight.
Good time to make the career switch.
Yeah, right.
One thing I'd like to jump back on, because mainly I've always been curious about it. You had the reputation at KFXM of being the bad boy and, the Paul McCartney thing and the concerts and everything. And then somewhere in the middle of this, you have an interview with Governor Reagan.
Yeah. Oh,
is there an interesting story with that?
There is an interesting story with that. So KFXM was in the Holiday Inn in San Bernardino with a glass window and a speaker outside where your fans could come watch you do your show and make requests, you over the speaker, right? And Reagan was giving a speech somewhere in San Bernardino but he was staying at the Holiday Inn. And I worked 7 to midnight, Monday through Friday. And then on Saturdays, I worked Saturday afternoon so that I could have Saturday night off, work with the concerts and whatever, and then have Saturday night off at Sunday. And I didn't have to be back to work till 7 p.m. on Monday. So it gave me a nice little break, little time off. I was doing my show on Saturday. Reagan was staying at the Holiday Inn. And somebody said, "Hey, Reagan is, you can see it right out the window." Have you seen the picture?
Talk to the hand. It looks like he's talking to your hand.
Right. Okay. So in those days, that little recorder, that little battery operated recorder, that was high tech. Okay. And it wasn't the greatest because it was battery operated. It was like sometimes slow down a little bit or speed up. But that was, as far as portable tape recorders in 1968 when he was governor of California, that was the latest and the greatest. So I have this portable tape recorder, right? So anyway, I don't know exactly how it got lined up, but the interview got lined up with Reagan while he was there at the Holiday Inn. I think I had somebody send him, or maybe I called over or whatever. But so I got the interview with Ronald Reagan. Well, what was happening at the time was Ronald Reagan had just taken away the funding for California state universities. And they were rioting on all the campuses, not only in California, but some of the other campuses across the country were also rioting in solidarity. And so it was a big thing. And I'm a hippie, right? These are college students. That's my audience. And, because all the college students in those days were hippies. They were protesting the war and all that kind of stuff. So I go in the room, they search me. I don't know. It was the state's equivalent to the Secret Service. He's the governor. So, and they're all suits. And they search me and all of this. And they're looking at, and that, again, that was the time when long hairs were the hippie druggies and the police were the pigs. So there was this division. So these guys were looking at me like the enemy. And so they patted me down everywhere. So then they say, okay, so my first question out of the chute was, Mr. Reagan, why did you remove funding from California state universities? And this is when all the campuses were waiting. So that was a real hot button question, man. And all of a sudden I could feel hot air on the back of my neck, these guys moving in, these suits behind me, moving in, man. And, I'm kind of, I'm under a little pressure now, and Ronald Reagan was under a little pressure. And his answer, Ronald Reagan said, I don't think that you can run a country by how loud people yell in the streets. And that was his answer. And it was a little tense from there.
The interview sounds congenial. I've listened to it a couple of times on your website.
Yeah, but he's a politician, and I'm, of course, I wasn't trying to be, But actually, those interviews that you listened to was not from that recording. The interviews you listened to, I interviewed them twice after that on phone, and those were, if you listen to them again, you'll see that was on the phone.
Oh,
telephone,
okay.
By phone. So I had interviewed him twice after that.
Do you see any possibilities in the near future of combating some of the pollution problems?
Oh, yes. I'm very optimistic about this. People could see, as I did this afternoon, the work that's being done on the Riverside campus. I think that we're going to see breakthroughs, and I think these breakthroughs are going to speed the day, and that within this decade we're going to see the airs cleaned. I think there are going to be technological breakthroughs in which we're going to discover that can be made an asset and can be recycled and used rather than just having to find a hole to bury it in.
Okay, Governor, thank you very much for your time and best of luck in your re-election.
Thank you very much.